Sunday night on the Joe and Joe Weather Show at its new regular time for Sunday, 7:35 p.m. Hurricane Franklin heading for a pass close to Bermuda. Tropical Storm Idalia risks to western Florida. We've got hurricane watches up for the west parts of the west coast of Florida, centered on the Florida Big Bend, and there are some thunderstorms that are moving through parts of the southeast, completely independent of those two systems. A nice day comes to a close in the northeast. We'll see what the next couple of days bring, and we'll have much more to talk about because next weekend's the Labor Day weekend. And this is the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Mulch, topsoil, sand, salt this winter, and anything to get you through a tropical storm or a hurricane. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
And Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board, and it's also on the description to this video. Use the coupon code I want a weather station for any purchase you make, whether it's this or anything else on the Tempest website. And if you do, you get a big
10% off.
That is correct. So here we are on a Sunday, Mr. Rayo, and few things have gone on since we were last together. Of course, we've got Hurricane Franklin, which is going to be a major hurricane soon enough as it's continuing to strengthen. It took a peek at the last recon a little while ago. The pressure's dropped a few more millibars. And we've got Tropical Storm Idalia in the Northwest Caribbean. It's kind of funny because it's been drifting all over the place since yesterday because Franklin's out there. It's not that far away, and it's actually created a very weak steering environment that it's in, but it is going to ultimately start moving to the north tomorrow. And I've had this nagging feeling from what I've looked at, the sense I get, and also the sense the Hurricane Center, in terms of how they've been wording some of the stuff in their discussions, is I wonder if they're just a little bit concerned that, the guidance strengthens this to a hurricane. And the last couple of runs of some of the global models have actually made it stronger than what they previously had before making a landfall. I just wonder if they have in their back of their minds that the setup here dynamically might not be ideal, but given the very warm Gulf of Mexico water temperatures that are up close to 90 in the Eastern Gulf, that we could wind up with something a little bit more. I hesitate to make too much out of this, but I'm just looking at everything, and it's just been nagging me that this could wind up being stronger than advertised by the time it makes landfall.
Well, first of all, Joe Z on the chat board says possible Cat 2 at landfall near Gainesville, and I find that kind of hard to believe, considering that Gainesville is nowhere near.
It's way inland.
It's way, way inland, so how can it possibly make landfall at Gainesville when Gainesville is, 50 miles away from the Gulf Coast? So, I mean, it may pass over Gainesville, but the actual landfall is probably going to be somewhere to the west and south along the Gulf Coast. Probably, if you're looking for a place along the Gulf Coast where landfall may be made, it might be somewhere between Steinhatchee and Cedar Key in Florida, somewhere around the Big Bend Aquatic Preserve, that area. Because again, Gainesville is way inland. In fact, it's almost midway between the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic coast of northern Florida. So
that's not a particularly. I mean, most Florida's been growing, but that is not a particularly heavily populated area. That area in the Big Bend. Not that there isn't anybody there. Of course there is, but it's not like Tampa. It's not like St. Pete. The population's a bit thinner, but nonetheless, there's going to be impacts from wherever it makes landfall. They've got storm surge issues. This is one of those situations coming in from the west or from the southwest that the surge is going to be important, even down to the Tampa Bay area or even a bit further south than that, because all that the water ahead of it on the east side with with more of a southerly wind is going to tend to be pinned into the coastline, which is different from when they come in, say, straight from the east. If they're coming into the east coast of Florida, or if they're coming up, crossing Florida and going to the other side, then it's a whole different game with the wind, wind direction and with respect to storm surge. I just still think that this, I don't know, something about it kind of made me think of Hurricane Michael, where the dynamics didn't really look all that impressive, and there was a persistent. I remember they kept talking about persistent wind shear, a moderate wind shear of 20 knots, and Michael wound up becoming. Not that I'm saying this one's going to become a Cat 5, but Michael wound up defying those strengthening negatives, much to the surprise of forecasters, as they had to keep playing catch up in terms of the fact that it just kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. But I don't know. I just, like I said, I've got this sort of this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that something like that.
Well, I mean, look what's happening right now to Franklin. Originally, we knew 5 or 6 days in advance that, yeah, Franklin eventually is going to come back after passing over Hispaniola and could rev up to hurricane force. And the category then was Cat 1. Then a few days later, they said, okay, maybe not necessarily a Cat 1, could strengthen to a Cat 2. Now, the very latest information on Franklin shows that the darn thing is expected to get maybe to a Cat 4.
Yeah.
And thankfully for the folks who live on the island of Bermuda, the track is a little bit further away than what it was looking like a few days ago. But still, you put a Cat 4 out there, and you're going to have not just rough seas and rip currents for Bermuda, which is just a stone's throw away, but even, as we mentioned, along the entire Atlantic coast, there's going to be rip currents and rough seas. Again, because these things, especially when they rev up to, a Cat 3 or Cat 4, they're like gigantic agitators in the ocean. And that's exactly what we're looking at with Franklin. Now, as far as Idalia is concerned, it looks like now that as it passes over the warm waters, and they are very warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, again, as you maybe have alluded to, Joe, don't be surprised if this revs up to something a little stronger than what the forecasters are thinking right now. And that's always been a problem. I mean, it's one thing they have pretty much, learned how to get the path down to a reasonable degree over several days, but intensity forecasts still are.
It's tough. It's very tough. And I've got the loop up, and there's just a couple of things that I've noticed here on this loop. I added a bunch of frames to it. If I'm going to draw a circle around it, the center is probably on the northwestern corner of this area of bursting convection that has been occurring this evening. Centered, they don't have the latitude longitude line, so I'm just going to guess. Oh, there it is. It's 20 north, and I don't it gets 85 west, I believe. So about 20 north and 85 west. Right in here, you can see there's actually some lightning strikes that are occurring of what may be not too far from where the center is. So this thing may be starting to get organized. It looked kind of splotchy earlier in the day. Also, if you look up to the north of 25 degrees north, you can see there's clouds running southwest to northeast. And there's a little bit of blow off going over there, so that might be some of that moderate southwest shear that they're talking about, that the Hurricane Center's been talking about. Again, I'd like to see what happens between now and tomorrow in terms of it getting organized. What exactly it's going to look like. How the core develops and how strong a core you wind up getting between now and this time tomorrow. That might be the ultimate determiner as far as where this is going to go as far as strengthening is concerned.
Well, whichever way you cut it, my concern is that I have my daughter in Florida right now, and she's supposed to come back on Wednesday. Now she's supposed to come back. She's supposed to fly out of Orlando on Wednesday, but my question is, will they allow any flights out of Orlando on Wednesday? Maybe they might just say, hey, there's a big hurricane or significant hurricane. Why don't we just, actually, it's not the government. It's the carrier. and the carrier may just decide, like, hey, we're not going to send any airlines out today. Maybe we'll go tomorrow, or maybe we'll go on Friday. I don't really know,
Well,
but it'll be it'll be interesting. And I
as
was
as I as I've said many times, when people have asked me about when we get these any kind of storms, particularly in the winter time, so they're asking me about airports. I don't do airports. I don't close
right.
airports. I don't. I know what the criteria is for airlines to delay or shut or airports to shut down. So it's sort of a you're on your own with this. I mean, essentially. I mean, I would imagine there probably be some delays, being that planes are going to have to circumvent two hurricanes, one that's off the East Coast and one that's in the Eastern Gulf of Mexico that aren't not that far apart. So I'm sure there's going to be some issues, even though she's on the East Coast. She won't have it won't have it too bad as far as any weather is concerned. But um, then again, thunderstorms in Oklahoma can wind up impacting air travel around the country.
And the other thing is that not Wednesday, but on Tuesday, the position of Idalia and the position of Franklin relative to the Florida Peninsula may mean that there could be a little bit of subsidence between the two systems, and will allow for a day on Tuesday where really not much is going to happen in terms of weather. So Tuesday might be a good day. I know she said she was thinking about going to Epcot on Tuesday, and that might very well be a good day to go, because after that, all bets are off as to how Idalia is going to affect Florida on Wednesday.
All
And
right.
you're right. She's not in the so-called Big Bend area or panhandle of Florida, where the storm is going to make its most impact. But still, you wonder whether or not the airports are going to be seeing how closely a potential Category 1 or 2 hurricane is relative to Florida, and say, the heck with it. We'll just throw in the towel and cancel everything for until tomorrow or Friday. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, how Florida handles this. I know that the governor has already declared a state of emergency for Florida, even though it's still a few days away.
So I've got the upper air. This is the 500 millibar at 18,000 feet, just to show you what's going on at the moment. So I'm going to just roll it back here to this evening. And of course, everybody, you can see where Franklin is, east of the Bahamas, and it's kind of riding around this ridge that is in the Atlantic. You got this big upper high that's way out to the east, well east of Bermuda, but it's sort of nosing in over the top, right near 35 degrees north, and building westward back toward North Carolina, but never going to make it that far west. But there's just enough ridging that Franklin is responding to that ridging by moving northwestward, at least for now. But that's left Idalia in this sort of no man's land. You've got the western edge of the western ridge in East Texas and points westward. The southern edge of the westerly winds in the upper atmosphere is running down from the Tennessee Valley, then off the coast of Virginia and the Delmarva Peninsula. So it's kind of in this whole zone here, back in the Northwest Caribbean at the moment, and in the Eastern Gulf of Mexico. There's virtually no flow, so it's just sitting there, and it's waiting for something to move it along. And I'm going to and part of and Franklin is part of this equation, because Franklin is out to the east, so it can't really. If Franklin weren't there, this would likely already be moving northward or even northeastward around the periphery of that high that's out in the Atlantic. But Franklin's going to start moving northward, and at the same time, you've got a trough. It's not a strong one, but there is a trough that sinks down into the Gulf of Mexico, all the way down into Central America, and this is going to allow Idalia to kind of ride the southerly winds there in the upper atmosphere and move it northward, and then turn it northeast, and then it'll start to accelerate, because you still can see the westerlies sitting down. This is Monday night, so the track to me looks fairly straightforward. So it's a question of, are we going to get, any kind of strengthening? What kind of strengthening are we going to get out of this? And one thing I'll bring up, I'm just going to bring up the 200 millibar map. If you notice at the 200 millibar map, what happens is as Idalia moves northward, there's a trough here that drops down at that level of the atmosphere into the western Gulf of Mexico. It's right in here. And there's actually a bit of an upper high that is sitting right over the hurricane, which is what you would see in a situation where you're getting a strengthening hurricane. If this trough were deeper and were to drop down, say, all the way down into the Bay of Campeche and down into the Mexico, that would probably create ideal conditions for rapid strengthening. It's not forecast to do that, but it is far enough south that it does allow for a very strong, a relatively strong outflow to develop over it. And this may be the reason why that suddenly the GFS takes it down to a 959. 959 millibars as it's approaching the Florida Big Bend, and then it brings it on land after that. And of course, Franklin seems to goes well to the west. The actual center of Franklin goes well to the west of Bermuda by, let's say about 4 or 5 degrees, so at least over 200 miles, and then kind of goes over the top of Bermuda and passes by to the northeast of it. So Bermuda's not going to get anything too terrible there other than some strong winds and maybe a couple of squalls that, from some of the outermost bands. So it really wouldn't amount to much. But Idalia is going to respond to that trough, and you see it here fairly obvious by the time we get to Wednesday. And at this point, the GFS is taking what it probably would be a strong tropical storm to the Georgia coast and to the Carolina, straddling the whole Carolina coast before it turns eastward. I think it's fair to say, and I'll go to a wider view here of the east, just again bring up the upper air on this, that sometimes these things when they come up like this in the eastern Gulf can shoot up the eastern seaboard, but you'll notice on Tuesday night there's a deep trough that's moving through the Great Lakes, and it bypasses it. It just basically kind of swings. It's in between. Idalia's on land, the upper center there is just near Wilmington, North Carolina, or Myrtle Beach. Franklin is just on the far right, just getting ejected to the east because of that upper trough. But there's enough westerly flow in the atmosphere, or northwesterly flow, that to me it says that there really isn't any risk of this getting much further north than North Carolina or maybe Southern Virginia, and then it just winds up getting kicked out to the east. I don't think we're going to have to worry about this coming all the way up the East Coast.
I would agree with you. And in fact, I would also say that locally here, because of that upper trough moving in from the Great Lakes and over the Northeast, Thursday and Friday should be sterling days here in the tri-state New York area with lots of blue sky, lots of sunshine, and also low humidity. Whereas on Tuesday, Monday and Tuesday, we'll have dew points in the 60s. In fact, you may get into the upper 60s here on Tuesday. Wednesday, look for the dew points to take a noticeable drop, especially during the afternoon, setting us up for Thursday and Friday, where dew points, especially those 2 days, may actually drop back into the 40s, along with, again, blue skies, bright sun, temperatures in the mid to upper 70s. Couldn't ask for a much better weather pattern, especially as we're heading into the big holiday, the final big summer holiday weekend. Joe, from this vantage point right now, I think it looks like the upcoming holiday weekend may be about as nice as what we had for the first of the 3 holiday weekends, Memorial Day weekend. This could very well be great weather for Getaway Day Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and maybe even Labor Day Monday as well.
Yep. I don't disagree. By the way, just really quickly, want to say hi to everybody. Welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. Big hellos to everybody on the chat board and those of you lurking in the background. Joe and I, like it when we get at least 100 likes on the show, so we're up to 44. So if you like the show, hit the like button. Subscribe to my YouTube channel using your Gmail account. And to turn your notifications on, because the Joe and Joe Weather Show is on Sunday through Thursdays at 7:35 p.m. Fridays and Saturdays we take off, but if there is a storm that's threatening on a Friday or a Saturday, we rearrange the schedule a little bit and we do something special, and we will always let you know ahead of time. So we've got the advisory from the Hurricane Center. It's 7:54, so the new advisory should be out at any moment. But at 4 p.m., it was at 20.1 north, 85.5 west, so well off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. You see the areas in blue indicating tropical storm warnings that are up for the northeastern part of the Yucatan, also for western Cuba. The Hurricane Center has this becoming a hurricane sometime maybe late tomorrow night. By 1 a.m. Tuesday, they have it as a hurricane as it's moving away from the Florida West Coast. And we've got hurricane watches that are up for the Florida West Coast, and that includes Tampa Bay, as well as storm surge watches. It actually goes, the watch goes south of Tampa Bay. And then goes northwestward from there. And if I remember my geography, it looks like it probably includes Panama City as well. You see the forecast track. Now, one thing, well, actually, no, because on this map they have the hurricane designator, just offshore. So early on the earlier forecast, it wasn't there, so you had to kind of figure out what they, you had to kind of read into what they might have thought how strong it would be before it made landfall. But they do have it as a tropical storm near Savannah Wednesday afternoon at 1 p.m. By 1 p.m. Thursday, they have it right over Hatteras. So this looks like it's going to, if it takes this sort of track, half the circulation is going to be over the open waters of the Atlantic. So that's going to help it maintain tropical storm strength up all the way up from coastal Georgia to coastal North Carolina during the from Wednesday afternoon through Thursday afternoon. And then you see they take that sharp turn to the right going eastward. And again, that's because we've got basically a northwest flow across the northeast. And if we go to the hurricane tracking models, you see where it's clustered pretty much on the Florida Big Bend, well north of Tampa Bay. But that area here is going to wind up dealing with some storm surge. And the track also takes it, some of them start to bend it to the right a little bit faster. A few of the hurricane tracking models have tracks a bit further inland. I don't know. I think that northern track that takes it off to Wallops Island and then goes to just south of 40 and 70, I think that's an outlier. There are a couple of models that are doing that, but the bulk of these models pretty much match up with the idea that we're going to have a recurving storm that's going to straddle the Carolinas. So we'll probably have tropical storm watches go up tomorrow. I would think they would probably put them up for the Georgia coast, the South Carolina coast, and the North Carolina coast.
Yeah, and again, this trough that's going to be passing over the Northeast later this week is going to pretty much suppress the effects of Idalia. Maybe we'll be still seeing red flags along the ocean shore areas for some rough seas and surf. It will be almost like a continuation of what's happening. Franklin will be leaving, but kind of handing the ball off to Idalia and saying, "Here, keep churning."
Right.
But I mean, again, thankfully, this looks like for us a very nice weather pattern shaping up for later in the week. A few bumps in the roads from Monday through early Wednesday. A couple of showers maybe late tomorrow. Better chance for showers here on Tuesday into early Wednesday, maybe even some rumbles of thunder. But then things dry out, clear out, and set the stage for some pretty nice weather for later in the weekend, the holiday weekend. But Joe, bringing up the precipitation map, and if you can see, the folks who are going to get hit the hardest out of this on the mainland will be in the panhandle of Florida, apparently, and also continuing north and eastward across south central Georgia and maybe on up into portions of the Carolinas as well.
Yeah, I think most of the heavy rain is going to wind up gradually shifting to the west side as it gets further north. Also, it's going to be moving. So, yeah, the rainfall amounts are going to be substantial. The yellow area, the dark green is 2 to 4. The yellow is 4 to 6, and the orange is 6 to 10. The light green is 1 to 2. So, the thing is, the fact that it's moving, it means that there's a start and an end to this in a reasonable amount of time. So right. We're not looking at will there be localized flash flooding? Yes. Will there be catastrophic flash flooding? It's hard to imagine that would be the case because it's moving so quick. It's going to be moving at this point. When it gets on land, it'll probably moving at 20 or 25 miles an hour. So that would prevent it from getting I would think 10 to 15-inch rain amounts. Sometimes you get those storms that produce ridiculous rain amounts. That should not be an issue with this. And I'll just go a little wider so you can see what WPC is doing further up the coast of Carolinas and Southern Virginia. They do have the inch and a half north of Richmond to the southernmost part of the Delmarva Peninsula, and then you get into the reds and the darker reds, and then you go to the orange. The orange areas here are basically 5 to 10 inches, and there's a stripe there that runs through in the interior part of southern Georgia into South Carolina. Then there's another area for eastern North Carolina where we're looking at substantial rainfall amounts. But if you just follow the track, I mean, if all you had was this map and somebody said to you, well, what's the track of this storm going to be? You could figure it out. I know the color is almost the same, so it'll be a little hard to see. And changing color for me on this thing is a little bit hard. I have to do it before the show. But the bottom line is, this pretty well represents the track of Idalia as it moves right along.
And our friend up in Alaska, Alfred K. Phillips, here we are talking about tropical weather and lovely weather for the upcoming last holiday weekend of summertime. And meanwhile, where Alfred is, he's up in northern Alaska, 34 degrees, 2 above freezing, and raining. That sounds rather depressing.
Oh, God, yes. Hurricane Franklin, meanwhile, forecast to become a major hurricane, and at 5 p.m., they're not doing intermediate advisories because they don't have any watches up for Bermuda. So at 5 p.m., it is at 5 p.m. Sunday, in case you're watching this during the morning hours on Monday, 25.9 north, 70.0 west. Top winds are 100 miles an hour, moving north-northwest at 8. It's forecast to become a major hurricane tomorrow, probably in the morning sometime. And they keep it as a major hurricane right through Tuesday afternoon as it comes even with Bermuda. But you can see how far west it's forecast to track from Bermuda. And then as it makes the turn to the east, it travels a fair distance to the north. So Bermuda's going to get some stuff out of this, but it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be anything too problematic.
Yeah, it just, the waves and the surf, and of course we're talking about Bermuda, it's an island or islands. So the surf is not going to be too good to be out and about in. But the lion's share of the heavy weather, the clouds, the rain, the winds, that's going to be taking place, thankfully, away from Bermuda. And last thing you want is a Cat 4 bearing down on you. But this storm looks like it will. It looks like they're going to dodge a pretty big bullet in Bermuda with this storm.
And Franklin, by the way, I've got the satellite loop up of Franklin. You can see on the last few frames a well-defined eye has developed, and it's getting that symmetrical look. So I'm wondering whether we might be seeing this now going into some sort of rapid strengthening phase, that Franklin may become a major hurricane, maybe a little bit faster than what the Hurricane Center is indicating. It's also not moving very quickly, by the way.
Right. It is not. It is not one of those rapid forward movers, like let's say a Wilma, for example.
Right.
It's plodding along, taking its own sweet time, and it's been doing that ever since it got its feet wet off of the north coast of Hispaniola a few days ago.
All right. So let's see. Why don't we just take a look at really quick? Let's see if there's any. Been trying to check out see if there's any. They've got recons out there. This is for. Let's go really quickly here. There's a recon there at Franklin, which they've got a pressure down, almost down to it's dropped quite a bit. I don't remember what they carried on the advisory, but it looks like it's about 961 or 962, and this was after the advisory came out. You see where that the red line is the pressure, the blue is the wind. The wind that's measured is up at around 90 knots, and the red line indicating the pressure is down just above 960. And if we take a look to see if they've got anything for Idalia. The information that's been coming in for Idalia has been kind of sparse for whatever reason, and now I can't even seem to be able to pull it up. So we'll check it again in just a little bit.